Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give it a couple of minutes just to allow those who aren't as tentative as you, the good audience, already joined us, allow them to join, and then we'll start. We'll look to start just a couple of minutes past the hour. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a couple of minutes past the hour. Can see a couple of people just popping in. We'll just give it one more minute and just allow those to navigate through GoToWebinar to join us, and then we will commence. Okay, I think we've given everybody plenty of time to join, so let's crack on. Thank you ever so much for joining us this afternoon. This afternoon is the subject of the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA for better terms. If you are new to the ZDL Group webinar, we like to do things a little bit differently, whereby it's very much more conversational between myself and one of my consultants here, and we do invite you to raise any questions within the chat area of the panel in front of you, which we will absolutely do our best to answer if it is not already covered by the end of the webinar. We like to make things a little bit interactive as well, so there will be some spot check questions for you, the audience, as we go on, and we encourage you to just pop your answer to those specific questions in the chat as well, and we'll then look at those responses and those answers as we fly through the webinar. We will be with you for the next 35 to 45 minutes, and again there will be recordings of this available post as well. So, DORA. Before we kick off, I'd like to introduce myself and my colleague. My name's Daniel Wood. I'm the Group CISO here at the ZDL Group, and won't read out the CV, but as you can see there, just been in the game quite some time, but always learning, and it's always nice to learn new things. Joining me today is Mr. Kevin Swatsridge. Hello, sir. He doesn't want to talk to us. He's on mute. There he is.
Chatting away on mute. You've missed all the interesting stuff now. But yes, hi everybody. I'm back to talk again. This time around DORA, and much like Dan, been in this space for quite some time. And again, you know, every time you think you've learned something, there's something else to learn, and you can forget it all and then learn about DORA, which is great.
Brilliant, thanks Kevin, and welcome. Okay, let's just fly through what we're going to go over to in today's session. We will go through an overview of DORA, just some underlying principles of what it's going to do. We'll take a look at the history of it and the timeline, and certainly indicate some key dates that are fast approaching us. We'll look at the key provisions that DORA highlights, just to make you aware of what they are. We'll then go through what we believe are our top actions for you to consider, a bit of a call to action, as it were, and then we'll wrap up with a conclusion, taking any questions in the chat or anything else that you may wish to present to us. But as I said, we like to make these interactive, we like to challenge you, and we always like to start our webinars with a bit of a question, but a question for you guys. So open up the chat, get yourself ready. What is the reported average cost of a data breach? That was for the year of 2023. Was it $2.1 million, 3.2, 4.5, or $5.8 million? Feel free to pop an answer in the chat if you want to take part. No worries if you don't. And we will go through the answers shortly. So, DORA, bit of an overview. I'm going to bring in Kevin here because one, you don't want to listen to me to talk all the time, but Kevin is absolutely our compliance SME within the ZDL Group, and for those that have worked with him in the past will understand why I'm handing this over to him. So, Kevin, let's go through it real high level before we delve into it in a little bit more depth. What are we looking at here then, sir?
So, I mean, essentially, to really kind of think about what the aim of DORA is, and it's really to recognize the fact that our financial institutions are indeed now digital institutions and subject to all of the potential risks and challenges that all organizations that operate online are, and increasingly have to consider that their digital presence is what maintains our financial stability across Europe. Therefore, there has to be governance and guidelines around making sure that is secure and indeed resilient. And that coverage is that consideration of essentially all financial organizations, from banks, insurance companies, investments, pension providers, crypto assets, everything, any organization that has a significant impact over managing, supporting, providing, and maintaining our finances. So this is an ongoing process, and we're having this conversation towards the end of its bedding in period. But was essentially came into power in 2023, and now we're at in January 2025. After we've skipped through Christmas, it will come into full force, and organizations will be expected to be able to demonstrate compliance. And the underlying components, as you can imagine from its objective, is really around focusing on those technologies, risk management, and ensuring that organizations are prepared to handle, deal with, report on incidents, to demonstrate a focus on resilience to ensure that they are able to both maintain services and recover quickly in the face of cyber disruptions, but then also to extend that further into the universe of third-party risk management and ensuring those suppliers who are increasingly critical to our banking infrastructure are also considered within that risk framework. And ultimately, the ability to bring those organizations closer together to share their understandings and learnings when it comes to cybersecurity and the potential challenges therein, in order to bring everybody up a level and be safer because of it. And of course, that is sitting across all financial organizations within the EU. This does, of course, impact organizations based in the UK and our own legislation which sits alongside this. But if you have a footprint in Europe, then you are accountable for aligning to this standard if you fit into that criteria. And that also extends to those organizations who are providing services and indeed critical services to the financial industry. So it's impacting a significant amount.
Fantastic. So when we look at things like the timeline, it very much echoes of what GDPR was. You know, when 2018, May 2018 landed, everybody said, oh, do we have a grace period for this to embed? Well, no, actually, the grace period, you're at the end of that grace period. Everybody else has kind of done something about it. I think this is probably similar and has that core focus. So when we look at just quite how intuitive this is to the financial industry, it's quite scary numbers. I mean, if you think there's over 22,000 financially orientated businesses and companies within Europe, so there's a lot of work to do. And again, we're hoping that many of you and many others have not left it until, shall we say, the 11th hour now to do something about it. But we'll go into a little bit more of the time frame now, Kevin, I guess, and just have a look where it originated and where it's got to today.
Sure.
So, Kevin, you said 2024 was when it kind of happened, May this year. But and it's been around for a little bit. But what's the process of us getting to where we are right now?
Well, I mean, initially, we're talking about the provisional agreement, that it was a thing that we needed and a concept all the way back in May 22. But even prior to that, someone's got to go, I think we need to do something about this. And when you consider the timelines of, pan-European legislation in such a significant industry sector, we're planning for something that starts in 3 years' time. So there's a significant amount of effort and thought from experts and lawyers and governments coming together to initially say, this is the sort of thing that we need that's going to prepare us for the future as we understand it now, and then starting to publish components of that to get people on the right page to be thinking about, okay, so what does this mean for a potential 22,000 companies and potentially those companies outside of that that are coming to deal in Europe from the US and so on and so forth.
Brilliant. So as we say, January the 17th is the, I guess, D-Day for 2025 when all of this applies.
Absolutely.
We'll go into a little bit more depth about what this applies actually means. But we asked a question earlier, and we looked at and asked is what the reported average cost of a data breach is in 2023. Now, this has some significance with the financial sector, with DORA, because obviously reporting element and risk management and incident management all resides on that. But for those that wondered, it was actually $4.5 million is the average cost now of a data breach. That's including any form of recovery time and back up and running, any form of fines paid, etc., etc. So I think that's gone up quite a bit, Kevin, hasn't it, over the last couple of years, for sure?
Oh, absolutely. It's an ever increasing number. I think in terms of when we start a new calendar year, it's like, what's the number going to be now, and where's it going to go in our quiz, and what is it for 2024, and what's the estimated numbers? But yeah, that and the global cost of cybercrime is certainly one to track.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The day counting down to when that starts reducing because of all of these wonderful things that are being put in place is long overdue. But yeah, for the moment, it's creeping up. So let's have a look then. What's another little question for the audience there? What's the estimated total losses in dollars in the financial sector over the last 20 years? So 2004, what am I talking about? And 2023. I know, it was so far away, I can't remember. I think I may have had hair back then, but anyway.
And this is down to cybercrime specifically.
Yes, it is absolutely.
Not banking crashes.
No, there's been a couple of them in that period, but yeah, absolutely targeted at cybercrime. Well put. So was it 12 million, 120 million, 1.2 billion, or 12 billion dollars total losses as a result, as a direct impact of cybercrime? Have a think about that, and we'll come back with that answer shortly. But the reason we're here, key provisions. Let's have a look at them. So, risk management, and specifically ICT risk management. Now, obviously, risk management, hopefully everybody does, and they do it effectively. But Kevin, where does DORA take risk management further? How does it? What do we need to know to enhance our own risk management framework to integrate with the DORA requirements?
So I think this is quite an interesting one, because risk management, when it comes to DORA, is essentially the bucket of, one, I understand risks, but what are all of the mitigating controls and processes that I'm going to put in place to manage, identify, manage, recover from, and protect the organization. So there's a whole host of different expectations around risk management, and having a framework in place that understands what it is, that categorizes those risks effectively, that prioritizes them for an organization, but also the components of getting the controls in place, assessing the effectiveness, making sure there's continuity plans. All of those other components sit into that bucket. So that's where I would suggest a significant amount of the effort to maintain compliance resides when it comes to DORA.
And I guess we're going to go into in a little bit more depth around that, what risk management looks like shortly as well. So, okay, so that's risk management. Another one of these pillars is looking at third-party risk management as well, and obviously that's a bit of a Pandora's box. I love to use an analogy and everything, but it's the responsibility of financial institutions who leverage third parties to risk assess in the same manner that we would internally, I guess, Kevin.
Absolutely. So organizations like us and others have been pushing the concerns around third-party risk management, and what are your partners and suppliers doing with regards to anything that may introduce vulnerabilities to your organization. And essentially, DORA is mandating the fact that the boundary of risk management is no longer at the door of your bank, but within all of those suppliers as well. And that may be third party, and indeed potentially fourth and fifth party suppliers that are providing services into the financial sector. Again, it's a huge piece of work, and you mentioned Pandora's box, and if there's anything that you need to do is to lift the lid on that box and really start to look at what's in there, who's in there, how many of those suppliers are there, how many are existing, how many am I not using, how many am I likely to be using in the future. Consider how to effectively understand the potential impact of those suppliers to your risk profile as an organization.
Amazing. So identification of those is absolutely key, I guess, and looking at how they could impact operational delivery of what the products and services is that you're providing.
Exactly. You can't manage what you don't understand.
Absolutely. You only know what you know. And it's what you don't know is often the risk. This seems a bit of a fancy title, Kevin. Digital operational resilience testing. Is that a fancy way of just saying this is doing a bit of pen testing, doing some tabletop exercising, and off we go? Or does it, at a high level, does it go into any more detail than that?
I think what it's really asking for here is more targeted, more detailed, more focused approach to a program of resilience testing. I think whilst many organizations have been quite comfortable with, okay, we're going to do a desktop exercise and we'll talk about ransomware and we'll play that out, and that is a useful process. Where DORA is starting to move the bar on that is it's really asking for that to be threat-led, that the penetration testing informs the potential vulnerabilities, which informs the desktop scenarios, that these are played out, that these are all effectively recorded and reported on in order to be able to demonstrate that not only does our incident response process meet the requirements of the standard, but also that our recovery protocols are in place and that we can restore systems, and that those things are also tested as well on a regular basis in context of credible, understood potential threats to the organization. So it's saying, don't just test that you can restore it, test that you can restore it under these kind of conditions, and really kind of push yourself to be prepared for the worst possible outcome.
Okay, all right. Wow. So a little bit more than just a pen test here and there then.
Yeah.
So ICT related incident management and incidents that are managed, classified, and then the reporting out of those. Does this follow similar guides to that of GDPR, where we're putting in more rigor around ensuring we know and understand how to respond to incidents, how we manage those incidents, and who we report these to? What's a little bit of context on there, if you may?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it is absolutely that, and it's including the regulators in that process. So if there is an incident, we need to be able to understand more effectively the holistic impact on the organization. What systems did it take down? Were they critical systems? How long they were down for? What did it affect in terms of revenue, transactions, throughput, customers? Is there reputational damage? Are we going to see customers looking to move their finances to other organizations because of these potential incidents? So very effectively categorizing, understanding and documenting and calculating the material impact of these significant attacks. And we're not necessarily saying that they're going to need to, talk about every event and, credential issue that has occurred, but certainly anything that has a significant or material impact to an organization, that needs to be recorded and reported effectively.
So it's really taking a look now on the not just how maybe a system has an outage, but actually the monetary value and the materialization of an incident, and how that impacts not just us as an organization or a business, but its customer throughput.
Exactly that.
Perfect.
Whether those customers are banks or hedge funds or individuals, it is causing a ripple effect in the financial markets.
Okay. All right. And I guess the final pillar that we'll go over, and again, you may have heard in other webinars when you're reading up on this that there is these 5 pillars of DORA. These are I guess the 5 things that we've really portrayed here. And I'm reading this, Kevin. I'm like, oversight of critical third-party providers. Well, we've done third-party risk management in pillar number 2 there. What is that? Just not a repeat? What's the difference? What's the variance here, and why is it in there twice?
Yeah, so it looks the same, but it very much isn't the same, in that this is less an accountability for those financial organizations, but more around the governing bodies who are supporting this process. So the agencies that are governing DORA are identifying those critical suppliers that are potentially supplying any number of different organizations. And we can easily point to the AWSs, the Azures, the data centers of this world, the service providers that many institutions will use, and then asking them, are you resilient, prepared? Are you meeting those kind of stringent requirements that says we as a sector are comfortable with you essentially underpinning, the financial industry across Europe. I mean,
Yeah.
when you consider what a few of those massive cloud providers are essentially accountable for, it's huge. It's huge, and you have to make sure that they are meeting those kind of requirements as well.
Okay, and we absolutely won't mention CrowdStrike or Microsoft in the same definition as that. So we'll quickly move on. We asked a question earlier. Total losses from cybercrime in the financial sector over the past 20 years. Few options there. It's actually $12 billion, and again, that's looking to grow exponentially over the next few years. We have one final question for everybody, and that is, what percentage of financial service organizations reported a ransomware attack this year? And again, this year up until November, or maybe October. Was it 35%, 45%, 55%, or 65%? Now, these are financial service organizations that have actually reported some form of ransomware attack within their organization or their supply chain, I guess. But any one of those are quite scary, but they're the ones that are reported. The ones that we don't know about are probably even worse. But let's move on. I'd like to focus a little bit, Kevin, if we may, on risk management, because risk management obviously is a minefield, and certainly if you've already got an established risk management framework as we have there, how does DORA interact with that? And we look at things like having, I guess, measuring apples for apples inside any organization is key, but what can we do to establish that risk management framework in organizations?
So, essentially, there are probably a very few qualifying organizations in the scope that don't have some sort of risk management process already in place, because there are already existing requirements for them to have that. But making sure that this is robust enough and holistic enough in terms of its approach to all of the different systems and components within an organization, there's an opportunity right now to ensure that everybody is comfortable with that current process. So how are we assessing risk? What are the thresholds that we're identifying? Do we need to modify that right now in order to ensure that our tolerance levels align to the expectations of DORA? And I think that's the key thing. Are we able to say that we are spending enough money and investing enough into our security framework to ensure that we are able to meet those requirements? And I think that's kind of the thing that underpins it from a framework perspective.
Perfect. And can we integrate DORA risk or ICT risk driven by DORA into our established risk management framework, or is it a separate register? How would you advise maybe on that? Can it be incorporated?
So, I'm going to hazard a guess that a significant number of organizations are going to already be ISO 27001 compliant and have those kind of risk management frameworks in place. And absolutely, that will underpin and provide most of what you need from I've identified it, I've understood it, I've assessed it, and I've got a methodology to apply to that. And as such, I think it can absolutely work. The question is, am I comfortable that it still works with the additional potential risks? So let's say you are considering your financial threshold for handling a risk, and then you have to consider, okay, what are the potential penalties if I am non-compliant to DORA and we have a risk? So therefore, the potential financial thresholds become a movable feast when you apply the additional rigor of that kind of compliance requirement on top of it.
Okay, and obviously with DORA, with any other form of kind of regulatory obligations, it doesn't tell you how to do it, it tells you what to do, and it's kind of down to us as organizations to implement that in the most appropriate way that we can. And I guess that not just for risk management, for the whole thing really, right?
Absolutely. So, and it still remains that it has to be applicable and appropriate to the size and complexity and value of that organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So continuity plans, I guess, is exactly the same, and it kind of leans towards embedding and understanding risk by doing business impact assessments to determine how the importance of recovery plans and continuity and identifying those systems that are more critical to the organization than others.
Exactly that.
Give us some key outputs of that one then.
So I think the key thing to consider is the name DORA that we're dealing with. We're not dealing with the Security Act or the Vulnerability Act. We're dealing with the Resilience Act. Yes. And the Resilience Act is absolutely underpinned by continuity plans to ensure that organizations are able to continue to keep trading, to provide their services, whether that's B2B or B2C, under the circumstances of a potentially severe cybersecurity incident, to be able to recover data and transactions and make sure that they are available. And as we mentioned earlier on, there is a wealth of more information and requirement within this kind of risk management process. And one of the things from a continuity plan perspective, there are clear guidances around the fact that data backups need to be air gapped. They need to be in separate data centers from your primary systems to ensure that transactions are protected. So there are some more clear drivers under here, and certainly around ensuring that the resilience components are addressed from financial organizations.
Okay, and I guess that's where it then steps into having those, as we say here, the multi-layered controls. So if you implement various different layers of defense, and I always like to look at this as a bit of a sandwich, where we have the employees, our organizational employees as that first line of defense, the human firewall, as I like to call it, and many others do, not saying I've copyrighted that saying, but and we've then got the technical controls almost as that filling, and then the security response teams, the SMEs within inside organizations, making up those three multi-layered tiered level of defense. What else can we provide context around that multi-layered of control? Because that can go quite deep, can't it?
No, absolutely. At the surface level, DORA is expecting organizations to have detection controls, to be able to identify the potential meaningful threats, to have intelligence coming in, to be able to understand what they should be thinking about next. So detection through to, the normal things that you would expect to see for an organization, excellent access controls, that you've got a well-secured network with your firewalls in place, and all of those common tools, all the way down to, as you mentioned, individuals who are knowing, aware, and capable of identifying potential threats and phishing attempts and those kind of things. But within that, all of those multi-layer controls comes all the way down to that ability to respond, recover, and provide the resilience that these organizations need.
So a bit of an ISO on steroids is what we're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so looking at continuous assessment then, and again, this is the spot check to ensure that what we're doing internally is appropriate for DORA, but does it just go to that level so we can set internal KPIs on our controls, or does it go deeper than that? Does it go further than that?
So I think what it's really driving is that kind of process of kind of harmonizing risk assessment with your policies, with those KPIs, the methodologies that you're using. So there is a coherent approach to testing, to continuous monitoring, to that, to threat identification, and all of those things being brought together to have a meaningfully categorized risk register that is effectively enabling an organization to spend their money and address the risks that they have most effectively. And that's a challenging question for any organization. And when we talk about that, we're talking about reducing the risk profile in a world where those risks are constantly changing. We're now talking about AI-assisted attacks. We're talking about deep fakes and voice cloning. And organizations that we're talking about here are those that are at forefront of post-quantum encryption, and all of these things that have to be considered for a significant organization in the financial sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And working, well, I used to work in quite a considerable time in the legal industry, and we always used to pitch our security controls standard on that of banks, because they just seem to be slightly ahead of the game. And I guess this is an example of that, where DORA has been created for the financial sector, where others will probably follow in legal, in retail, in whatever it may be. So I guess all of this pins down to, though, the actual governance. So that the tip of the spear, and that is getting your governance structure right, Kevin, when you're looking at, and again, the amount of support you get from the top of the business to do that, because there is an accountability on the board, on the executive level, to make sure that it has got these elements supported, certainly with risk and the identification of risk at that level, whether it be strategic risk that disseminates down into that ICT risk. Anything kind of more to add there? Is this very much top of the business, tip of the spear kind of thing?
Absolutely. And I think if you look across any kind of legislative control, especially around privacy and security, they're all driving the same thing, that it has to be a top-down cascaded approach where the senior people are involved and understand what is going on. Gone are the days where you can say, well, I've done security because I hired a security guy, end of. It's now his problem.
Yeah.
That's not the way anymore. I've hired that guy because he needs to tell me what to do, and I need to work with them effectively. And that is really driving that and ensuring that that governance not only sits around the entity itself, but in that capacity of working within the sector and sharing information and demonstrating good practice and all that kind of good stuff. So what we hope to see is where those organizations really identify that and get on board with it. As they go up, everyone else comes up around them because they see great practices. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just helps with, if you're reporting this upwards, it helps make justifiable business decisions at the end of the day, which could impact the wider audience of the organization. So, okay. So risk management, that seemed fairly meaty. We'll look at opening Pandora's box once more and take a look at third-party risk management. So we've got a few things on there, Kevin, but due diligence. Let's have a look at that. When we talk about third-party due diligence, obviously assessing the stability of our third-party suppliers. What else does it go beyond?
So it's really one. There's kind of two kind of third-party supplier approaches. There's the financial one. Can they continue to provide me with these services? Are they going to, do I expect them to continue to be trading in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that may be? But certainly more so from a DORA perspective, this is very much around, do they also have the technical controls and the security capability and the compliance to the kind of standards that I'd expect them to, in order to be able to say, yes, we are not going to increase your vulnerability by too much by becoming one of your partners. And increasingly, certainly, and what we're seeing is that the choices around who organizations choose to partner with or provide critical services is absolutely predicated on their ability to demonstrate compliance to security standards.
Absolutely, and again, we are part of that supply chain, aren't we? And ensuring that what we do is not going to impact those clients and customers of ours. So yeah, absolutely, it's applying the right due diligence appropriately to what supplier is in front of you, and based on the services that they provide you. And I think that's underpinned here by something that we mentioned around the contractual agreements, and knowing and understanding what the limits of those contractual agreements are.
Absolutely.
Obviously,
Absolutely.
we need these in place, right? I mean, that you can't just go into partnerships and supply things without these things. Long gone are the days it was a handshake on a golf course somewhere, and all of a sudden we're doing business together.
No, absolutely. There has to be clarity about, especially when we kind of talk about cloud providers. Who's accountable for what? Who's accountable for the security of the environment and the server and the machine that this application sits on? Where does that live? Who's accountable for make sure that it's backed up safely, and who's accountable for the controls? And there's still confusion for some organization about, what does my cloud provider do versus what do I need to do? And having those clear contractual agreements in place enables an approach of shared responsibility that is clear and understood. And certainly in terms of, when it comes to finances, who is ultimately accountable for compensating any, meaningful losses based on a clear understanding of accountability and responsibility for delivering the services that we expect of them.
So it's absolutely a heat shield in between both parties to make sure that they are covered in a way that it enables the businesses to function and operate properly.
Exactly that.
Perfect. Now we're going to go on to something now, and this is something that is probably the biggest time-consuming element, certainly of us in a supply chain, that we see our clients struggle with, and that is third-party risk assessment and assurances. So there's a huge amount of time and effort that goes into it and I think it's one of these things that at board level they don't really, a board may not understand the value of assessing and continuously and regularly assessing third-party supply chain chemistry, but it has to be done, right? It's got to be done, and certainly DORA is now mandating that it's done in a more rigorous fashion. But
absolutely,
we've seen companies struggle with this, haven't we?
It's difficult. It's hard work, and it's difficult. It's difficult for big organizations to be able to effectively understand the capabilities and controls that they are responding to when it comes to a unique questionnaire from any given supplier. And it's difficult for small suppliers who are supporting other organizations that are feeding into the finance industry to be able to constantly meet the requirements of those risk assessments. Because what you see is, obviously we respond to these, and they are different every time. There's a different slant on it. It's complicated. It's time consuming for both the client and the provider in order to be able to do that. And I'll be blatant on the basis that that's why we created that thing called Vendor, which is on this this webinar, to help organizations solve that problem and do it more efficiently and more effectively and repeatedly, because we recognize the challenges of dealing with that.
No, 100% there. And I know you wanted to mention something around criticality of security debt coming from third-party dependencies there. What does that mean? What does that mean, Kevin? What is security debt?
I mean, so when we talk about the risk assessments and identifying things and controls that we might want to be able to put in place, or things that we might want to update to improve the security of a system, there's research that says that pretty much all financial organizations are carrying some level of security debt. So there are things that they want to do. There are things on their risk registers that they want to improve. But what you see is where that code is first party, that the organization has developed themselves in-house, however that may be, they can deal with that relatively quickly. So that takes somewhere in the region of sort of 9 months. But when you then need to deal with that debt and it's with a third-party supplier, then often that extends to sort of 13, 14 months in order to get that change affected, because it's to some extent outside of your control, and it has to go through a different process that is managed externally. So the effectiveness of your contracts and your risk assessment and your understanding of that all facilitates that process of dealing with it effectively.
And I guess that will be identified during the point 3 and 4 there, the risk assessments to determine the security debt of your third party, but also response plans, I guess, because where you have a resilience upon a third party to deliver something, and if that is what's operationally impacting you, those incident response plans need to tie in and align to your third parties, and that's where contracts come in as well, I guess, for service level agreements and everything else.
Absolutely. We'll come on to the incident response next, but essentially there is an expectation placed by DORA that your critical third parties that are involved in the services that you deliver need to be part of that process. So they need to join you in dealing with that desktop scenario and helping you model the potential threats and vulnerabilities.
Which kind of gets rid of the saying it's not us, it's you, or it's not you, it's us, or something like that, isn't it?
It's we. It's us. We all suffer if something goes wrong.
Right, absolutely. And I guess final point there, and we won't delve into this too much, but continuous monitoring of this. This isn't just a one-time thing. It's something that you have to regularly achieve and do and show and evidence, right?
Exactly. So with regards to this, it's at the very minimum level, it's an annual process at least. Realistically, what you want is a continuous conversation about the effectiveness of the services that you get, the uptimes, the availability, the incidents that they have dealt with and managed effectively on your behalf. All of those things should be made available to you as a client to be able to manage your compliance with DORA.
Perfect. Okay, so for everybody in the audience, we spent a significant amount of time on those first two elements because we feel that risk management and certainly third-party risk management are the two key elements that is probably the most intuitive to an organization. We will now move on to operational resilience. Now, this seems a little bit more obvious to us, Kevin, really, and as we described earlier, it is more than testing, and it's fundamentally getting a resilience testing plan and framework in place that is repeatable, that you can continue to show evidence for, and again, regular is a key word here, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it has to be regular, it has to be targeted. DORA kind of really focuses on that term or that acronym TLPT. It loves an acronym, but threat-led penetration testing. But essentially means I've identified a credible threat, and we're going to test around that to demonstrate whether or not we are able to defend against it. And that is absolutely key.
And I guess that could be as simple as an attack chain could absolutely be we're gonna test our employees for their how well they deal with a phishing email, and exactly. That would start that attack chain that says, well, X amount of people have done, which means the risk is this. Now what we're going to do is we've got credentials when they're going to go in. So mapping those threat and those test scenarios out is crucial to understand where the weaknesses are, I guess.
Exactly that, and then reporting on those and documenting it and making them a record that can be delved back into, that demonstrates that we identified these things, that those things found their way to our risk plan. We're starting to join the dots here, and we were then able to effectively prioritize remediation of the issues that we've identified through our more rigorous testing processes.
Understood. So, but is this all things that people can do internally? Does DORA highlight that this is, if you've got a security team internally and you've got a tester in there, that's you're all fine, well and dandy and good, and they can just carry on repeating what they do, or does it go further to say there is some form of independence required for this kind of testing and resilience?
So it really kind of targets two levels of the word independence. So there is independence within an organization, i.e. a function that is security or quality or internal audit that sits separate within an organization that provides a level of independent evaluation, but also very specifically around things like the threat-led penetration testing, that on a schedule that is also carried out and assessed by qualified knowing individuals from an external third party who might simply be able to turn up without the blind spots and just point at a thing and go, what's that? What does it do? Why is it there? Because nobody else asked that question, because it's always been there, because they've worked internally. So there are benefits in doing that, and it is expected to happen, and it needs to be documented and scheduled to maintain a compliance position.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. Well, look, I think that's, again, training employees is part of that resilience testing, I guess, as well. So providing them with awareness on what to look out for at the various levels of what they do as an organisation, with what they do as a day-to-day jobs,
everything,
I guess.
From training to threat intelligence, test to penetration testing, to scenario-based testing, to red teaming, to blue teaming. All of these things kind of fall into that bucket, all the way down to I've got a backup strategy. Have I tested it? Can I meaningfully restore this information? Can I validate that I've got everything that I needed? Can I get it from the long-term storage in Iron Mountain somewhere and bring those tapes back to life? Whatever that may be, but because you've got it, you still need to demonstrate that you're able to effectively use those strategies and can prove that they work.
God, tapes bringing back from site, that bring back some memories.
It still happens.
It still happens. Absolutely. So okay, so let's look on incident management now. And again, I guess we won't dwell too much on this, because I think what we need to look at is the final pillar here. But incident management, obviously, everybody has or should have, if you follow an ISO, a NIST, CSF, whatever it may be, a fairly comprehensive incident response plan and process. And we're not talking about incidents where somebody needs their passwords changed. We're talking about incidents verging on kind of crisis. So more crisis management due to a data breach, a cyber attack, or anything else here, Kevin, aren't we?
Absolutely. So we really have to understand how to effectively and continuously analyze what that incident meant, and whether that's a crisis or a relatively low level event, but that they are streamed effectively and labeled effectively. And I think the key component that differs here is, as we mentioned earlier, the requirement to report those to the authorities should they be a meaningful attack, and to understand what it impacted, for how long, for how much, the whys and wherefores, materiality of that incident, and having to tell the authorities that it occurred.
So it's absolutely having a documented process to say, at this point, we would contact a regulatory authority, an ICO, or a DFD, whoever it may be within the sector, within the industry, and knowing who to involve in that incident inside your organisation.
Exactly, and the data points that you need to be able to tell them.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So So I guess, you know, it probably come up as part of the resilience testing, but absolutely testing something like this, building that muscle memory on how you would respond to these, performing tabletop exercises of a data breach, of a third-party supplier impact, would help this process and the internal management of this process a lot more.
Absolutely, yeah. The organizations that we work with that are really good at it do this all the time, and they're really quick and they're really effective. But they're really quick and really effective because they do this all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah, it's the value out of performing and getting that muscle memory in to say, I know what to do now, bang. But also having it documented and backed up in a policy, in a playbook of something that you can call upon should you be new to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. I want to come on to something really important, because actually when you started talking about this and when we started researching this, I didn't really capture the concept of that final pillar, which I want to go on to now. And you elegantly put it for me in a way that I was just like, yeah, that makes perfect sense now. So criticality of third-party providers, and obviously we've got some heavy hitters there, the AWSs, the Google Clouds, Cisco's, Azures of the world, and Equinix and that. But what this final pillar, Kevin, what's this about? How can we delve
so that's
into
really that's really about the industry and its governing bodies identifying who's critical to financial operations across Europe. Who are the providers that hold the key to the castle, that if they disappeared tomorrow would impact a number of banks? And some of the there is a list of criteria that need to be met for a supplier to drop into that critical list. But it really is, how many countries do they operate in? How many banks are involved? What's the amount of money that they're dealing with? And the brand names that we're shamelessly advertising here are the ones that we recognize all the time.
Yeah.
In terms of how beholden we are to their infrastructure, their controls, their security, and if they went away tomorrow, we know that there will be an awful lot of pain.
And I guess probably just to point, other service providers are available, but but again, I think it does echo in regards to the previous incident that we mentioned, that we should never mention again, that how resilient supply chain is on, or how resilient organizations of any sector are on specific suppliers, and some of those very weighted ones there. I mean, when you're talking about that particular incident taking down kind of airports and things like that, you kind of get to the gravitas of, if Azure or AWS or Google Cloud goes down and there are 10,000 of those 22,000 banks resilient upon one of those service providers, ouch.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you then start to get the like you say, the gravity of what DORA is trying to protect, and it's not just forcing this bank over here to jump through some hoops and be a little bit more secure. It's about establishing security practices for this industry, for the financial security across Europe. So it's quite important.
That sounds it. I quickly want to go through information sharing agreement, because that's something that's come up in a number of places. It's come up in GDPR, DPA, that kind of thing. It's come up in other kind of frameworks. What's this about in a nutshell?
It's very simple. We talk about the 5 pillars. There's kind of this little 6th pillar that sits on the edge of that, on the periphery, which is information sharing, and it really is about collating all of that threat intelligence and information around potential threats and things that organizations have identified and or encountered, in order to be able to enable other organizations, other banks, other financial institutions to learn from their challenges, whether they be mistakes or great ideas to avoid those things. And then it's about having a publicly, a kind of public forum where that information can be securely and effectively shared with people that are able to use that information effectively.
So it's just ensuring that we learn from good working practices as well as areas for improvement of others, and it is a sharing community that enables basically everybody to be a little bit more secure.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the best lesson you can learn is something that went wrong, and you go, well, I do it differently next time. And if someone else can learn that lesson and tell you about it, then you can avoid having to do it the painful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's something that I've worked with lots of different CISOs, and I remember a comment that a very influential CISO that in my career turned around to me and said, and again, legal industry, and he said, why wouldn't I share what we've done with others? Because if they're only learning about it now, we're still ahead of the game anyway. And it was a comment that like that actually made me think and say, well, why wouldn't we share information? Because ultimately we all want to be secure. It's if people are catching up to us, well, we're moving, we're not standing still, we're still moving. So it's ensuring that step by step, as you go up the ladder to security, everybody's getting that just a little bit more secure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then we asked a question earlier, didn't we, about what financial service reported a ransomware attack in 20. It feels like ages ago now, but we did ask that, and a whopping 65% of organisations actually reported a ransomware attack this year. Financial sector is obviously reporting probably slightly more than other areas, but again, whopping, and it's a scary number because obviously if 65% are reporting it, it's got to be a high percentage that maybe don't even know that that wasn't aware of it or that haven't reported it. So what's the actual impact of ransomware? It's quite scary, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And this is just one of those common attacks we have to be concerned about.
Oh, yeah, well, again, ransomware is just one. Absolutely. And there's many more. What we'd like to provide everybody on the call, and thank you for sticking around to see us through to the end, is a bit of a call to action, a bit of a top 10. Now, this will be available to you recorded post anyway, so you can catch up on this as well. But Kevin, we've just highlighted kind of 10 specifics here that we think these are a bit of a slang dunk for our colleagues in the industry, in the sector to really consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to boil all of this down to here's the things to go away and start focusing on, and it's easy for us to write down 5 words. It's a little bit more difficult for a financial organization to deliver against them. But yeah, I mean, critical, the risk management framework, having a process that is integrated in your organization for identifying, managing, assessing, and driving mitigation plans around your risks. And for that to be facilitated by regular risk assessments. So a risk assessment probably needs to stop being, well, we did one last year, to being something that's a little bit more regular and involved in testing. That there is those protocols in that incident management process to know when to contact the appropriate bodies and let them know what's happened, and the information that is effectively captured and can be communicated to those bodies in the way in which they expect. And also the resilience testing, and that acronym again, the threat-led penetration testing, to demonstrate that meaningful thought has gone into that process of how do we simulate the types of attacks that we're expecting to see. The management of third-party providers, assessing new ones, reevaluating old ones, but continuously ensuring that they are effective, and we are prioritizing those that are most critical to us. I say develop a continuity and recovery plan. Most organizations will have that in place, but ensuring that it's compliant with the requirements of DORA, and that the appropriate testing is carried out to demonstrate that it's as robust as it can be. The definitions of clear roles and responsibilities around ICT and risk management, making sure that that kind of RACI model of effective management of risk sits across the organization, and that the appropriate resources are available not only to assess those risks, but of course to be able to deliver those mitigation plans to reduce the risk profile of a given organization. Where possible, joining those information sharing mechanisms, that somebody is accountable for both gathering that information in and pushing it out in order to be able to further facilitate the intelligence in an organization to be able to more effectively identify and mitigate threats and risks. And then, of course, the thing that's popped up a number of times, regular training, absolutely critical. Regular training for everybody, the security awareness training, but also regular training for those people that are part of these processes in order to be able to effectively manage those risks and manage the security frameworks that they've got, all the way up to good practices and effective crisis management for the most senior people in organizations. So those are our preferred top 10. There are others. There are some things that you'll have in place and some things that you won't.
Yeah, as we said, others are available, but this is what we see as some slam dunk ones there. But look, Kevin, all I want to say is thank you ever so much. I learn something every time I talk to you, and I'm hoping everybody on the call has taken something away from today. Like I said, the recording will be available. Give us a shout on our socials or anywhere with any feedback on this webinar as well. But all is left to say is a huge thank you for joining us today. If you do have any questions, and I appreciate we've overrun slightly, but thank you for those that held on, please email either your account manager, email us at our support at zdlgroup.com email address, and we will absolutely follow up with you. So Kevin, thank you as always, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.